Have you ever counted coins with trembling hands, not from poverty, but from fear? Do you glance at your bank balance with a breath held tight in your chest? Not because numbers define you, but because they somehow do? Beneath the hunger for wealth often lies something quieter. A wound stitched into silence, the feeling that security is love, that value is earned, and that without enough, you are not enough. She carried that wound every day, a woman whose hands had known both labor and prayer. She had never begged for gold, only for the ease it promised. Each sunrise, she whispered mantras for abundance. Yet her nights were riddled with calculations and guilt. As if wanting more was shameful, but not wanting it was dangerous. To desire, and to be ashamed of desire, that was the trap. And the deeper she fell into it, the farther peace slipped from reach. Mai did not want to be rich. She wanted to breathe. To open a cupboard without dread. To light incense without wondering if it was wasteful. To give without measuring what might be left after. What she did not know, what her journey would slowly reveal, was that wealth does not come from control. It finds the soul that has learned to release. And for Mai, that revelation began not with a plan, but with a stranger's story, told on the steps of a forgotten temple. The woman had smiled as if she had once feared the same fears. And she said nothing but this: there are 4 moments in life that turn scarcity into flow. They arrive quietly, but if you bow to each one, abundance will come, not as a guest, but as a companion. Mai didn't yet understand what those moments were. But something in her, a voice deeper than thought, whispered, "Follow." So she did. And each step she took would teach her to soften the grip. Until she no longer chased wealth. She welcomed it. Welcome to Zen Companion, where stillness speaks and stories heal. If your heart, too, is weary from the chase, stay close. Let Mai's journey show you what's possible when fear dissolves. Subscribe, and walk this path of release and revelation with us. It began with a bowl of rice. Not the food itself, but what it revealed. Mai had prepared the meal as she always did, mindfully, with care, counting each grain like a silent prayer for enough. But that day, as she passed the steaming bowl to a barefoot monk who had appeared at her gate without a word, something shifted. He bowed deeply before taking it. Then, looking into her eyes with the warmth of someone who saw not her body but her burden, he asked gently, "Why do you offer with fear instead of joy?" The question lingered like incense in the air, soft, sweet, impossible to ignore. Mai didn't answer. Couldn't. Because the truth was too raw. Her offerings, her generosity, even her acts of devotion, they were all laced with quiet panic. Every coin she placed in a temple box, every candle she lit, every cup she gave to another. They were prayers for permission to receive. Not declarations of trust. That night, sleep evaded her. The monk's words pulsed in her chest like a second heartbeat. She walked the garden path behind her home, barefoot under the moonlight. And each step stirred a memory, her father counting bills at the table, her mother slicing fruit with anxious eyes, a teacher once warning, "Dreams are luxuries for the rich." But something cracked open in her that night. Not with logic, but with longing. She realized she was not just afraid of having too little. She was afraid of being too much, of letting go so fully that she might become weightless, untethered, truly free. What if abundance wasn't something to chase, but something to receive only after releasing the need to prove she was worthy of it? And so, without fully knowing why, Mai returned to the temple the next morning. The monk was gone. But on the step where he had stood, there rested a folded scrap of cloth. Inside, a single line stitched in golden thread. Wealth begins in the palm that can open without trembling. The words stitched in gold echoed within her like a bell, soft, haunting, undeniable. But truth rarely enters without resistance. And Mai, though stirred, was still shackled. She clutched the cloth to her chest and returned home, unsure of what to do with the silence it left behind. The next morning, she stood at the market stall where she sold her handmade incense. A customer held out more coins than the cost, a gesture of kindness. Mai hesitated. Her smile faltered. Her hand reached, but her heart recoiled. What if I take more than I deserve? What if this blessing costs me later? What if life takes it all back? She thanked the woman but gave her extra incense instead, balancing generosity with fear. Later, under the shade of a Bodhi tree, she wept, not from lack, but from the exhaustion of never feeling safe to receive. That night, she lit a candle and sat in stillness. In front of her, she placed 5 small coins, tokens she had hidden in a box for years, just in case. One by one, she whispered to them, "You may go. I release the fear you carry." Then, gently, she placed them in a wooden bowl and walked barefoot to the edge of the riverbank. The moonlight danced on the water as she tipped the bowl, letting the coins fall into the current. Not to waste, but to surrender. Not as loss, but as offering. She didn't expect magic. But something within loosened, like a knot long tightened around her breath. She inhaled more deeply than she had in weeks. Still, the next day, doubt returned. She caught herself hoarding rice. Felt the sting of worry when the wind knocked over a display of incense. The shift had begun, but the grip of fear had not yet let go. Not entirely. Not yet. 3 days later, with bare feet dusty from wandering and heart heavy from the tug-of-war between trust and fear, Mai returned to the monastery's outer gardens. Not for answers, she had stopped believing in them, but for quiet. For something older than thought. There, kneeling by a worn stone path, was the same monk she had once passed as a child. His silver robe shimmered faintly in the sun, as though woven from rain. He did not speak at first. He only tended a patch of wild chrysanthemums, plucking away dry petals with a reverence that made the world feel still. Mai watched him, the silence between them full, not empty. Then, with the gentleness of someone brushing dust off a sacred text, he said, "The river doesn't fear the stone. It simply finds its way around it. What if your fear is not meant to be conquered, but softened?" She didn't answer. But her eyes brimmed. He rose and placed something in her hand, a tiny scroll, tied with red thread. She hesitated before unrolling it. Inside, written in trembling ink, was a single line. "You are not meant to earn your breath. You are meant to live it." Mai's knees gave way, and she sat on the earth beside him. Not as a seeker. As a soul finally quiet enough to listen. The monk offered no name, no teachings. Only presence. And in that, a memory stirred, of the child she once was, who once believed the world would catch her if she leapt. Mai closed her eyes. And for the first time in years, she truly believed she might leap again. Share this stillness with someone who no longer trusts the wind. That evening, the sun folded into the horizon like a whispered blessing, casting amber light across the monastery's stone walls. Mai walked alone through the inner garden, scroll still in hand, words echoing louder than thought. You are not meant to earn your breath. For the first time, she didn't rush to understand. She let it sit inside her, like a stone warming beneath the sun. Her shift didn't arrive with fireworks, no burst of clarity, no sudden release of fear. It came quietly, as a soft unraveling of something tightly coiled inside. She realized she had lived for decades chasing worth in the form of balance sheets, performance, and contingency plans. But no amount of saving had ever silenced the inner scarcity whispering, "It's not enough. You are not enough." The monk's words were like a bell, sounding a truth she had buried beneath years of striving. So she took the scroll to the temple shrine, a place wrapped in incense smoke and the scent of sandalwood. Before the stone statue of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, my knelt. She did not pray for more money, or for the fear to disappear. She simply lit a single candle, her hands trembling slightly as she touched the flame to the wick. And as the candle flickered to life, she whispered, "Teach me to receive without grasping. Teach me to live without fear." Then, slowly, with reverent hands, she placed 3 coins, her last, at the base of the shrine. Not as an offering to get something in return, but as a gesture of surrender. A declaration, I will no longer bargain with the universe. That night, she fell asleep beneath the paper lantern swaying in the garden breeze, the warmth of the candle still in her chest. And for the first time, the silence felt abundant. The days that followed did not greet Mai with immediate relief. There was no cascade of fortune, no divine sign confirming she had done the right thing. Instead, there was discomfort, deep, quiet, and persistent. Like a hunger not for food, but for the illusion of control she had just laid down. Each morning, she walked past the shrine where her coins remained untouched, a quiet reminder of her vow. And each morning, a small part of her wanted to take them back. The world outside the temple didn't shift to meet her stillness. Letters arrived, one from the bank, one from the landlord, both bearing sharp edges of urgency. Her fingers trembled when she opened them. Anxiety, like an old ghost, returned to sit beside her as she sipped her morning tea. But this time, she did not chase it away. One afternoon, as she swept dry leaves from the monastery's garden path, a young novice named Rin approached her. Barefoot, with robes too large for his frame and eyes that held far too much stillness for his age, he spoke only 6 words. It takes time to trust emptiness. Then he placed a smooth river stone in her hand and walked away. That night, unable to sleep, Mai sat beneath the Bodhi tree at the edge of the garden. The stone rested in her palm, its cool weight strangely comforting. Around her, the night sang with wind and the soft hum of crickets. She listened, really listened, for the first time in years. She realized then that her greatest obstacle wasn't the fear of losing everything. It was the shame of believing she had never truly had anything that mattered. But slowly, gently, she was learning to count a different kind of wealth, measured in silence kept, in generosity given without audience, in mornings where the sun touched her skin and it was enough. And in this slow awakening, the garden became her teacher, the wind her ally, and the stone, her reminder to stay. Just as the quiet began to settle into her bones, a letter arrived that pierced the fragile peace she had nurtured. It was from her sister, estranged for nearly a decade. The words were simple but heavy. Their mother had fallen ill. Not gravely, but enough to stir the winds of guilt. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the argument over inheritance. Over how money had split love into ledgers and silence. Mai sat with the letter folded in her lap for hours. Her body remained still, but inside, old wounds bled fresh. She thought she had released her attachments, but this one ran deeper than fear of scarcity. This was the ache of a heart that had once traded belonging for pride. Under the bamboo's shadow, she wept not for the illness, but for all the words unsaid, for the years she had used her pursuit of security as armor against vulnerability. That night, the dream returned. The woman in the red scarf stood again by the riverbank, but this time, she did not whisper. She simply looked at Maya and held up 3 fingers. Then one by one, she folded them into a fist, and pointed toward the east. Maya woke before dawn, shaken and breathless. She didn't understand the full meaning of the dream, but she understood its pulse. Sometimes, abundance requires reconciliation. Not with the world, but with the parts of ourselves we once exiled. And as the sun rose, golden and quiet, she knew her journey was no longer about letting go of money. It was about returning to what had once been more valuable than gold: forgiveness, belonging, and the courage to love again. The path to wealth had cracked open a different longing, one far deeper, far older. She stood at the train station, ticket in hand, unsure if she would board. The call to see her mother again felt like walking barefoot across shattered memories. But as the train approached, the ache in her chest sharpened, not from fear, but from something else. A sudden, sobering awareness of how long she had carried the weight of being the one who left. The one who chased stability while her roots withered in silence. In that moment, time stretched. Not in the way clocks do, but in the way hearts sometimes do, when they are torn between 2 lives. One life where she remained here, cloaked in spiritual stillness. And another where she stepped into the storm of reconciliation, with no guarantees, no perfect words, just trembling honesty. Maya boarded the train. As it moved through fields and fog, she pulled from her satchel the prayer beads gifted by the woman in red. Each bead now felt like a doorway. To the child who once begged for approval. To the sister who felt betrayed. To the daughter who hid behind ambition. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes and began to chant softly, fingering each bead with sacred care. Not to attract wealth. Not to invoke serenity, but to call back the scattered fragments of her own heart. She chanted not for a solution, but for surrender. Not for control, but for release. And for the first time, the anxiety that once buzzed beneath her ribs fell silent. Not because she had answers, but because she had finally chosen presence over escape. Let your breath carry your pain to stillness, and your stillness return with truth. The garden behind her mother's house had not changed. It was overgrown in places, the stone path half swallowed by moss, but the silence was the same. A silence that once made her restless, and now, curiously, felt like home. Maya sat cross-legged beneath the apricot tree she used to climb as a child. Her mother was still inside, asleep after a long talk that ended in tears, in apologies spoken and unspoken. There had been no dramatic healing, no sudden redemption. But there had been presence. And that was everything. She placed a small wooden bowl of water beside her, watching sunlight ripple across its surface. Her fingers traced the rim 3 times clockwise before she gazed into it. Not to see the future, but to honor what was here. I don't need to be free from all fear, she whispered. Only to stop letting it make choices for me. The realization came not as a thunderclap, but like the wind shifting through branches, subtle, certain. She saw now how deeply money had tangled itself in her idea of safety. Not the paper itself, but what it symbolized: worthiness, acceptance, power over the unknown. She dipped her fingers in the bowl, then touched her forehead, marking a silent vow to let go, again and again, each time fear returned. To trust not in accumulation, but in alignment. That afternoon, she walked barefoot along the moss path, placing a single coin at the base of the apricot tree. Not as an offering to the universe, but as a thank you for every anxious night that had brought her here, for every empty wallet that had led her inward. If something within you has softened, even slightly, share this light with a heart still searching. The job offer came on a Tuesday. A high-paying position in the city, fast-paced, prestigious, safe. Her old self would have said yes before the final sentence was spoken. She stared at the contract, the digits bold and gleaming, like armor. But something deeper stirred now. A knowing that safety bought in fear was no safety at all. This opportunity came wrapped in old patterns. Overwork masked as ambition, stress disguised as success. And a salary meant to silence the ache of misalignment. That night, my return to her quiet apartment. She lit a candle at her altar, not for clarity, but to honor the clarity already within her. Then, kneeling before a worn mat, she placed 3 lotus seeds in a bowl beside her, each one representing a different version of her life. The one she was offered, the one she feared, and the one she dreamed of in silence. She stared at them in stillness until her heart spoke softly. The one rooted in trust. And so, she wrote a single line on a piece of rice paper. I choose peace over prestige. Presence over pressure. She folded it, pressed it to her chest, and buried it beneath the seeds. The next morning, she declined the offer. Not with arrogance, not even with certainty, but with grace. With grounded, trembling grace. Later that week, she received a call from a small meditation retreat she had once applied to in passing. They needed someone to lead a new mindfulness program for women in transition. The pay was modest. The purpose was vast. And for the first time, the path before her felt like a mirror. Not of fear or urgency, but of everything she had reclaimed. Breathe gently into this moment. Your truth is not late, it's ripening. She no longer counted her worth in numbers. Not in savings, not in salary, not in the frequency of yes, or the rarity of no. Her mornings now began before sunrise, not out of obligation, but out of quiet reverence for stillness. I walked each day to the retreat center with bare feet, feeling the damp earth remind her she belonged. She taught not from mastery, but from memory, of what it meant to be lost in fear, and of what it meant to return. One morning, a woman in her group wept as she spoke of her fear of not having enough. I didn't answer with teachings or steps. She took a coin from her robe pocket. Old, worn, its engraving faded from years of touch. This came from the last bus I almost didn't take, she said. The ride that led me here. She placed the coin in the woman's palm. Let it remind you, she whispered, that wealth will follow where your trust goes first. That evening, alone in her room, I sat beneath a scroll gifted by an elder monk. Its ink whispered 5 simple words. Empty hands receive the most. She breathed in deeply, realizing she no longer lived with clenched fists or anxious breath. Her body moved with the grace of someone no longer chasing anything, because nothing was missing. The fear had dissolved. Not because she had conquered it, but because she had ceased feeding it. Let your next breath carry you home to what truly sustains. She did not return as someone richer in gold or title, but as one whose silence now carried the weight of truth. When I visited her village again, no one noticed at first the change, but children fell quiet when she passed. Strangers greeted her with hands pressed gently in respect, and the elders, who once feared she had lost her way, now looked into her eyes and saw only stillness. She spoke less, but when she did, people listened. At the marketplace, a woman clutched her purse with trembling hands, counting each coin twice before making a choice. I approached, smiled softly, and placed a warm piece of fruit in the woman's basket. "No debt. Just trust," she said, and walked away, the wind trailing a scent of orange blossoms behind her. She had brought nothing back from the monastery. No wealth. No teachings. No promise of miracles. But the way she walked. The way she met each moment as if it were enough. That was the gift. That night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, I placed a single candle in the window. Its flame flickered, steady and unafraid. A symbol, not of what she had gained, but of all she had released. She no longer sought to control her path. She simply honored it, step by sacred step. If this story touched something quiet inside you, let it grow. Light a candle. Breathe with it. And if your heart feels ready, subscribe for more life-changing stories. Share this message with someone that's still searching. Subscribe to walk this journey with us and comment on your biggest limiting belief about money. Your voice, your presence, your healing, it matters here.